Let's call the March 4th City Council meeting to order. The Pledge of Allegiance first. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Fruin.
Here.
Councilmember Mohan.
Here.
Councilmember Wong.
Here.
Vice Mayor Moore.
Here.
Mayor Chow.
Here. Do I have any closed session report?
Not this evening, thank you.
Thank you. We have two ceremonial items. The first one is recognition of March as the Youth Art Month. I believe we have a presentation.
Mayor, we have Director of the ICE Team Program on behalf of the Santa Clara County Office of Education. Barbara Flores will be receiving the proclamation and I believe wishes to make a few comments.
Hi, welcome.
Yes.
Good evening, and thank you, Mayor Chow and members of the City Council of Cupertino for your support of the arts education in our schools by presenting the Youth Arts Month proclamation tonight. Again, my name is Barb Flores, and I'm the Director of Integrated STEAM and Learning Acceleration at the Santa Clara County Office of Education. Our team actively supports districts in implementing a comprehensive arts education program, which includes Arts Ed Connect grant and gives money directly to teachers to support the arts in their classroom through the SV Creates. And we also hold a Young Artist Showcase in May, where all students, grades kindergarten through 12th grade, have the opportunity to support and submit their artistic talent digitally. And then it is celebrated in May. And at the Santa Clara County Office of Education, we have one of the largest, through this event, we have one of the largest arts showcases within a county office of education. The arts education has a positive effect on students, and it increases their attendance, increases higher academic achievement, greater confidence, and higher civic engagement through these arts programs. We also have coming up the mariachis, which is another form of the arts. So we do a variety, like I said, comprehensive arts. The mariachis, which we invite you to join in. It'll be on April 3rd, and so there's more information on the website. So we are very thankful for your support in this way. So again, on behalf of the Santa Clara County Education, and as someone who played in the band growing up in elementary school and the choir, and someone who loves to draw, we thank you for recognizing March as the Young Artist or the Youth Arts Month in Cupertino. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the overview. If you haven't visited the county office, education office, I think I always admire the artwork of students all over the building. Thank you. Please invite us to the art showcase and those other events.
Okay, thank you.
So let's all take a photo. Here's a proclamation. So I, Mayor Liang Chao, and the Cupertino City Council do hereby proclaim the month of March in the city of Cupertino as Youth Arts Month to support, encourage, and advocate for art education in our local classrooms and to celebrate students' creativity, inspiration, and joy through artistic expression. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The second proclamation is the recognition of March as the American Red Cross Month. We have Stuart Chesson, lifelong volunteer, to give us a brief presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Stuart Chesson. I'm the co-disaster chair for Santa Clara County, and I want to welcome you. And I do have a little presentation, I think, that's coming up here. So we've been in existence over 140 years, and we're still going strong in there. And our job is to help people through any suffering that they have. We try to help all, no matter their status, their race, any of that. So as we go through the next slide here, we can see that we have different agencies. So yeah, the next slide, please. There we go. And so we have our disaster services. We sent from Santa Clara County close to 50 people from this county down to the Los Angeles fires, and a lot of them spent more than 2 weeks there, up to 4 weeks, helping people in the fire to help recover, and they're still trying to wrap that up down there in Los Angeles, even though we have closed all the shelters now down there in LA County. We also go to a fire at least 3 times a week somewhere in Santa Clara County. So not only do we help with Santa Clara County Fire, with San Jose Fire, and the other 9 fire agencies, and then we meet the clients that need assistance right then and there after a fire. Blood services, we're 40% of the blood supply throughout the United States. And I think almost every 3rd person that goes to the hospital needs blood. And so that 40% of the blood supply, lots of them is through our donors, and we deliver the blood to the hospitals all around the county here. And then we train people in doing first aid, CPR, first aid. So we have our training services to try to see if they can help others when they're out there on the streets. And then we have international service. And you may have seen, like in Gaza, the International Red Cross. We're one of the 200 countries that have the International Red Cross membership, and we help, and we don't take sides. So we get into places where a lot of other people can't get into to offer assistance. And then we also help service the armed forces. So yeah, we have cell phones nowadays, but most service personnel cannot have their cell phone, and when there's an emergency, it's hard to get hold of them, especially if they're overseas. And we help them get home if they're in case of an emergency back at home. As we go to the next slide. So you can see we go to many disasters here that affects us, over 180. We help every day of the year. We have our 800 Red Cross number, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day on that. And we also help in impact of getting volunteers where needed, and we help in many different volunteer functions too, so like preparedness fairs and stuff like that. As we go to the next slide, in Santa Clara, you can see we went to 102 disasters, mostly home fires, and most of those are kitchen fires, unfortunately. And we had 16,000 blood donations, and we've given 2,000 assistance to service personnel on that, and we've had over 1,984 volunteers deliver some sort of humanitarian service. And one more slide, I think, is and say thank you.
Thank you for your important service. I hope everyone is already signed up as a donor and organ donor. Thank you. I, Mayor Liang Chao, and the Cupertino City Council do hereby proclaim the month of March in the city of Cupertino as American Red Cross Month, and encourage citizens of the city of Cupertino and all Americans to support this organization and its noble humanitarian mission. Thank you for all that you do. Next, we have postponements and orders of the day. I believe we have a request to postpone item number 5. The
Yes.
brush abatement program, because the county would like to coordinate the date for this meeting, and so it will be postponed to a date uncertain. Right.
Yes, Mayor, we are, in order to assist with the county fire department to coordinate with the other jurisdictions who need a little bit more time for this item, staff is recommending a motion to table the item to a date to be determined.
Okay, may I have a motion to table the item?
Motion to table the item.
I'll second it.
Oh, motion to table the item, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'll second
Yeah,
it.
thank you.
Sorry, that was not on.
Okay.
The motion carries unanimously.
Next, we have the oral communications. City Clerk, could you introduce the item?
Yes, this portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the council on any matter within the jurisdiction of the council and not on the agenda for discussion. The total time for oral communications will ordinarily be limited to 1 hour. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes. As necessary, the chair may further limit the time allowed to individual speakers or reschedule remaining comments to the end of the meeting on a first-come, first-heard basis, with priority given to students. In most cases, state law will prohibit the council from discussing or making any decision with respect to a matter not listed on the agenda. A council member may, however, briefly respond to statements made or questions posed by speakers. A council member may also ask a question for clarification, provide a reference for factual information, request staff to report back concerning a matter, or request that an item be added to a future city council agenda in response to public comment. So, Mayor, I currently have 8 requests to speak. Actually, make that 9 requests to speak. That would take us to 27 minutes. Okay. So we'll start with Ahmad Yazdi, followed by Parimal Kopardekar, followed by Mark Fantazi. Anyone wishing to provide comments on this item, please have your request submitted in the next 9 minutes. Welcome, Ahmad.
Thank you, council members, for giving me the time to speak. The new council majority...
Sir, will you may I ask you to speak into the microphone so our viewers and council can hear you? Thank you.
The new council majority got about over 18,000 votes in the election, and the main platform to run the campaign was pro-resident. So residents of Cupertino have put their trust and faith in the new council majority, and we are hoping that you take our city back from the developers and their allies. And I want to mention this, that every time you rezone a lot from R1 to R3, the only winner is the landowner, because immediately you are handing them a check of millions of dollars. If you look at the land value and the land zoning changes, they become a lot more richer than what they used to be. And I also want to share a map of, is that showing okay?
Yes.
This is the latest CAL FIRE map that was updated in February, just a few weeks ago. And the red area is Linda Vista area. And the red area, the dark red, is very high fire danger. It's not high, it's very high. So we have high and we have very high. And that red area.
They can't see this.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, okay, here it goes. So that red area actually is Linda Vista Drive and Evelish Court, which there are plans to build 52 townhomes there, going toward the Linda Vista Park and then going toward the Blackberry Farm. They're all part of this very high fire danger zone. And this is the latest one. This is probably just a few weeks. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, just a few weeks old. So I just want to bring this to the attention of the council, and I want to mention that the fires that we have had in the past few months, in the past few years, we had the Paradise fire, we had the Eaton fire, Pacific Palisade fire, and then we have the Lahaina fire. And Lahaina fire did not even have grass or hills, but the entire town burned. The common denominator in all these fires was the fact that the city was not prepared. They did not understand the magnitude of these fires, and they could not respond to these fires carefully. That's why we had about 100 people died in Lahaina, about 27 people died in Pacific Palisade and Eaton fires. So this is, again, I want to emphasize this. The city did not anticipate this type of magnitude of disaster. So what I want to show you now is the map from Google that shows, kind of maps out the exit routes and our city. If that green area is a very high red zone, and if you can see that the only exit route from the Linda Vista area and the open grass area is Bob Road. And if there is so if you can see that there is Columbus.
Thank you, sir. That is your time.
Okay.
Thank you. Next we have Parimal Kopardekar, followed by Mark Fantasi, followed by Ying Sosik. Welcome, Parimal.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for saying my name perfectly. I appreciate that. So my name is Parimal Kopardekar. I go by PK. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I live on the Baxley Court, which shares a fence with Evelish Court. I had a hard time renewing my home insurance few months ago. I was going to be canceled and had to purchase insurance that would have costed me more than 3 times, which would have been close to $8,000 per year. With much difficulty and much limited coverage, that too. With great difficulty, I was able to convince and continue the insurance. This was before the fires in Southern California. Now, fast forward. Recently, our fire hazard maps has been updated, as you all know. Now we are in a very high fire risk area. I'm very concerned about the Evelish Court development, 6 to 10 feet away from my backyard with 39 feet high walls. I think and I thank all the city officials, particularly Amy and Luke, to do thorough assessment of the Summerhill proposal, and I continue to appreciate everybody's valuable inputs and collaboration in that. I urge our beloved city officials to take new hazard risk very seriously and conduct a thorough environmental review, including the fire risks. I also would like to invite you all to come to see my home and see how the experience will be firsthand. Some of you have visited my home and we have shared the fence and shared how the neighbors look like. But please come and see it. It's really, really frightening to see the fire will be that close. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Mark Fantasi, followed by Ying Sosik, followed by Jennifer Griffin.
Yeah, my name is Mark Fantasi, and I presented a email to all of you several weeks ago. I came here and addressed the city council with that email. In there, I stipulated certain conditions that we expect the city to consider in evaluating the Summerhill Evelish property. Now with the new fire hazard map, these considerations have raised to a higher level of importance to us, especially to a consideration of a life safety condition because of some of the things we've already talked about, egress, and most importantly right now is the insurance situation here in California, where there is published data that stipulates that some housing sales have fallen through because they can't get fire insurance. So this project, which sits about 20 feet from my property, stands 40 feet high, essentially is putting a 40-foot high stack of kindling 20 feet from my property, which I've had my home insurance canceled. I struggle to find replacement insurance, and this is only going to make matters worse. It could devalue the property values in the house, in and around this development. And this is not a consideration that the builder is going to take. Mitigation measures are not going to solve this problem. This has to be seriously considered by the city council, and planning department, and I'd be happy to discuss these things with you. I'm a civil engineer. I understand some of these issues probably better than some of the people working at the city. So this is a very serious condition for us, and we need to evaluate this very cautiously moving forward. This is a horrible project for this area. There's other things that could be done. Single-family homes could be put in there, but this project is not suited for this neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Next, we have Ying Sosik, followed by Jennifer Griffin, followed by Maria Wong. Welcome, Ying.
Hi, Mayor, City Council, Attorney, City Manager. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. So I've been coming here for 8 months now. And, first, just to talk about 2 development projects. But this time I just feel like there's a real urgency like never before. I really feel it in the pit of my stomach now. And the reason is that I recently flew over LA, and just to fly over that charred remains of that neighborhood, just the devastation. You just think like the lives, the property, the identity, the memory, everything that's just lost forever. And I came home to a notice in our WhatsApp group of, hey, have you seen, your house, in a red area on the very high risk fire map, and that just connected things in ways that I hadn't even imagined before. So then the question is, are we prepared? How do we know we're prepared, right? So then I think I try to picture what happens if there is actually a fire in my neighborhood. So I live on Linda Vista Drive. The way to get out is McClellan, past the McClellan farm, or Bub. And those are 1-lane roads, right? So I try to picture emergency vehicles trying to come in and we try to go out. And how would that work? And I counted there's 60-something houses on the straight part of Linda Vista Drive. The Avalanche project development with 51 units would double the traffic, say the least, on our road if everybody just takes one car. So given that we are in a very high risk, very high hazard level area already, why add more kindling to an area that's already hot? And looking at the map, I had one interesting observation, that red part that includes our neighborhood and big parts of the neighborhood, it's in what's called the LRA area, locally responsible area. And I think about who's local. You're local because you're our city. We're local because we live here. The guy who's selling his lot, he's not local. The builder who wants to build at that sort of density, they're not local. We together are going to be there holding this situation. It's us. So I feel for the first time our interests are so completely 100% aligned. So let's get ourselves organized as a locally responsible party, and let's do right by that neighborhood, do right by our city, because we are locally responsible. We are the local, as in you.
Thank you, Ying. Next we have Jennifer Griffin, followed by Maria Wong, followed by Greg Updegraff. Welcome, Jennifer.
Good evening, City Council. I'm glad we have this time to discuss items that are going on in the city. I will tell you right now, I started reading about some of the changes that are being proposed for the Westport project, formerly the Oaks. There are, I think, 2 sections of the property have been built out now. The third area, which is adjacent to Mary Avenue, is currently empty, and I believe that now they want to remove the underground parking and reduce the retail and not pay park in lieu fees. I think this is coming to Planning Commission next week, and then you all will see it again. I was at the meetings years ago. I mean, this was first started when my niece was in college in Corvallis. She is having a baby next month. I mean, this is how long. She's 29. She was 24 when this project first came in. She's been married. She just bought a house. She just closed escrow. I mean, how long is this project going to go? I'm really concerned that this last section has been delayed. Why was it delayed? I mean, some of the things about the housing bills, I will tell you right now, my husband's mother passed away in January. She had had Alzheimer's for close to 15 years. She was in memory care from July of 24 to January of 25. The family paid $8,000 per month for her care. There is memory units going in or proposed on this project. Most memory care units have family access 24/7 because, believe me, the first time there are problems and my mother-in-law had to be moved from one unit to the other, my brother-in-law's family kept her at home for the last 7 years, 24/7, to keep her at home. The family was committed. They would go in at 1 a.m. in the morning. Okay, so I can't contend someone saying, believe me, if I was paying $8,000 a month for someone in care and that she paid for it, family did, I would demand that I have parking access. I mean, it is criminal if someone is doing something like this and not allowing the family to have access. We need to have a discussion about parking. I have a lot of other issues about this, but this project really has some problems reducing the retail
Thank you,
and the
Jennifer. That is
parking
your time.
fees.
Next, we have Maria Wong, followed by Greg Updegraff, followed by Gili Yahalam. Welcome, Maria.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, council members, I'm standing here tonight wearing orange in solidarity with the Bibas family, the nation of Israel, and the world that are still mourning of the brutality against humanity, especially against innocent, helpless, vulnerable children in the hand of evil. My heart is broken. What happened to the Bibas babies by their captors in captivity should shake all the core of our humanity. Here in our own backyard in Cupertino, a hateful, bitter resident has decided to desecrate Israel's flag with graffiti to show her uneducated, uninformed hatred on display for neighbors and passerbys to see. This is the kind of tasteless graffiti we see by the riverbank and in homeless encampment. But in tranquil Cupertino, have we gone down so far of our civility in our class? I went to her house on February 14 and knocked at her door. To my appreciation for the records, she opened the door and I cordially introduced myself and the purpose of my visit. Our conversation was not very long and ended in her slamming the door hard at my face and, to my disbelief, saying anti-Semitic slurs. The Jews deserve it. Later, on public records online, I found out the lady is a medical professional, a surgeon doctor whose license has been revoked because of her violation of hit and run while driving under influence, resisting arrest, and assault on law enforcement officer. There is no justification for her character traits and mounting up the repugnant display that has caused fear in community members passing by her house, especially Jewish children who do not deserve this public intimidation. Madam Mayor, council members, this is not Cupertino. Under no circumstance should we accept radical hatred and divisive ideologies on our community, in our college campuses, and in our schools. Please do within your election promises and authority and influence to make Cupertino a neutral city to politics and racial division. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Greg Updegraff, followed by Gili Yahalam, followed by Ola. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you. My name is Greg Updegraff, and I would like to thank you for allowing me to present my concern. I am a spokesman for the apartment residents of the Westport Senior Apartment Complex at 21301 Point Reyes Terrace, Cupertino. I love my apartment. I love living in the city of Cupertino, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to once again live in the city that I grew up in. My concern is that we clearly do not have enough on-site parking. The original plans for the apartment included an underground garage for the 48 residential units. This was removed from the plans at some point before the apartments were built. I realize that plans frequently get modified in the course of getting improved, but nothing was ever done to replace the parking that we lost. We are now forced to scramble every night to find a parking. Each and every single parking spot available gets filled by 9 o'clock or earlier. Sometimes the last car to arrive has to park in a questionable location or forced to park in a dark, secluded, off-site location. I am proposing a solution. Open up the parking spaces on Mary Avenue for the overnight parking for residents. Put up a big sign saying no RV parking on Mary day or night if that's a concern. Create a permit system for residents so that anyone can see at a glance whether a car is allowed to park there or not. And also have the city-affiliated tow truck company enforce it. Residents would watch and report non-resident cars to the towing company. We have been told by staff previously that this solution cannot be done because it would have to be allowed everywhere in the city. But the parking spaces on Mary, they're already in place, left over from the previous Oaks Shopping Center. It would take minimal effort to accommodate our proposed solution, just a few signs and implementation of a permit system. It certainly would make a huge difference for us. I am concerned that one of us is going to get hurt walking to our car at night, especially when a retail business opens in our building and takes away even more parking spaces. This poses a very real danger I believe can be avoided with my proposed solution. I'm asking that the council direct staff to make the minor changes we feel necessary to solve this potentially serious problem. We are only trying to provide a workable solution for all. Thank you for your time, and I hope you seriously consider this proposal.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Next we have Gili Yahalam, followed by Ola, followed by Ray. Mali. Welcome, Gili.
Hello, my name is Gili Yahalom. I'm one of the founders of the Bay Area Jewish Coalition. I've been a Cupertino resident for the last 9 years and always felt I belonged here. The anti-Semitic flag incident on February 14 rattled the entire Jewish community and left us feeling not safe in our own neighborhoods. For an outsider, this might seem like a minor incident, but for our families, it's a scary escalation. In the last year and a half, our students suffers anti-Semitism incident and hate behavior in our own local schools, and this incident is hurting us in our own streets. I want to thank Cupertino Mayor Liang Chow for being a true partner and standing with our community. I also want to thank Councilmember Ray Wong for your true support. We know that this anti-Semitic incident does not represent the city good people and peaceful community, but we are disappointed that the city didn't issue an official decisive statement saying that you won't tolerate this Jew hate and that you condemn it. We hope that the city will take stronger action in the future to ensure the safety and well-being of all its residents. Together, we can work toward a more inclusive and tolerant community. Thank you.
Thank you, Gili. Next we have Ola, followed by Ray.
Please, no applause. We don't want to any speaker to feel intimidated or not by their content. Thank you.
Next, we have Ola, followed by Ray. And then there are 3 members of the public who requested to speak virtually.
Hello, my name is Olga. I'm a Cupertino resident for the last 6 years, and I here wanted to share some of the feelings and thoughts regarding the anti-Semitic flag incident put up in the neighborhood. I have a 7-year-old child who is fully aware that she was born in Israel. She is very proud of that fact and loves her family back home without any political agenda. She's 7. And we have friends who live near that street, and I need to think every time we go there, if my child, who is a reader, will see that flag and read that hateful message, and how will I explain to her that this is what a neighbor decided to put up on a public-facing fence in a street. So thank you to the mayor for condemning this incident. I talked to many representatives who understand that this is hate speech, yet not a hate crime. And yet it is heartbreaking to see such expressions of hate in our community. We lived here for 6 years. It's a very peaceful and lovely, a very diverse community that we have enjoyed thoroughly being a part of. And I would love to hear clearly from the whole city of Cupertino that this is not okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Olga. Next, we have Ray Mali. Welcome, Ray.
Hi, guys. Thank you. Excuse me, I had trouble printing, so I'm here with my whole computer. First of all, I wanted to thank you for allowing me to speak. I wanted to thank the panel. I know it's difficult. I run a company, so we'll come daily with complaints, so I know how you feel. So I am here. I'm a citizen, resident of this area. I have 3 children in the school district, but I'm also a grandchild of Holocaust survivors. 75% of my family was basically eliminated, okay? So this is, the roots run deep, right? It's not something that we talk about, it's something that comes up whenever we see racism, anti-Semitism. For years, I've stood in solidarity with every racist occurrence that happened in our area. When it came to Jews, we didn't feel it for the past year and a half. You know, there were little bright lights in the area, but we need everyone's support, including yours. We are a minority. And, you know, when I look at the picture of the flag that was desecrated from this neighbor, it says, "Enough genocide, evil Jew state, never again." Never again is actually, it comes from the Holocaust. So it's hurtful to even see that. And I want you guys to put yourself in our position. Think about where you come from. Think about if someone desecrated your flag, if someone spoke to your ancestors in such a way that was so, you know, insultful that every time you walk by with your children, you want to hide their eyes so they don't have to see it, okay? We have been through so much in the past year and a half. We're not violent. We're not, you know, posting racist slurs all over the place. What we need is support from the community, you know, and you know, just to give you another concept, right after the Holocaust, Jews were actually ethnically cleansed from every Arab state that they were living in. And there are facts and historical pictures of this, the migration, and they were forced out or killed. They had the choice of every single Arab country. There's only one Jewish state, okay? There's so much more that I can say, but I just wrote a few things. Israel's not an occupying state, okay? We never were. Our roots go down to 4,000 years. You dig in the ground in Israel, you find Jewish and Israeli remains. We've always been there. Israel has not committed a genocide, okay? So writing this again is it's taking history and rewriting it, okay? Israelis have not colonialized any part of Israel. Again, this is not factual. So everything that's written on this flag that is displayed for our children and community members to see, they are lies, and it is hate speech. So yes, we're requesting you guys, and this is the 4th time you're hearing it, but we're requesting you guys to, yes, stand with us, issue a statement, but also do something about it, because we don't want to walk another day and have our children see this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. And now we will move to those members of the public who are requesting to speak virtually. There are 3, San R., David Y., and Tracy K. Welcome, San.
Good evening, Mayor Chow and council members. I would like to request you to reflect as you are going through almost 25% of the year already. We are into March. I would like to ask you to reflect upon what is truly under the control and jurisdiction of the council. There are a number of project areas such as housing and land use that is not under the jurisdiction due to state laws. And I should remind everyone, I'm speaking on behalf of myself only. There are a number of things that are housing element related that we cannot change due to state laws. And so if we ask ourselves, what can council actually do for residents? It comes down to quality of life and public safety agendas. And on quality of life, we have had no agenda items that have advanced the agenda over the course of this year. We have been asking for July 4th fireworks, haven't heard an update from council on that. We have asked for Blackberry Farm events on July 4th to be resumed. That has actually been undiscussed in the midst of all of the firework and the alternative discussions that occurred. The Blackberry Farm event celebrations got lost. We've been asking for the reopening of Blackberry Farm for more than 100 days so that the pool can be used year-round and for event facilities to be used year-round. And unfortunately, that item, even though CWP is in progress, has not made progress. So I ask all council members to truly reflect on what impact can you actually have? And it wouldn't be housing element now, looking backwards. So please focus on quality of life and think from the perspective of residents. And what can you do to actually improve quality of life? Quality of life for residents means giving us things to do, giving us places to go, places to enjoy, retail to experience, and being able to get there without being stuck in traffic and without being stuck in fear that somebody's going to run a red light. And on all those fronts, council has not taken up the agenda. We were told that the roadways would not be impacted because of lane changes on Pienza. However, we need to bring that item back to council to understand what real changes happened, because what we're seeing on the streets is that the east-west traffic seems to have shorter traffic light timings, and people are running red lights even more frequently because they can't get through the signal on the east-west signals. This is at Stelling and at various junctions of Stevens Creek on the east-west corridor. So please focus on quality of life. Please focus on public safety. These are things that are still under your control. You can make an impact. And please stop the degradation of our roadways and bring these items back to agenda where you can have an impact. Thank you.
Thank you, San. Next we have David Y., followed by Tracy K. Welcome, David.
Good evening. Like my neighbors, I'm speaking tonight on the Evelich Court project. I want to talk about quelling cumulative risks in what has now become a compounding problem. First, I want to emphasize that the state's fire marshal recent designation of the area surrounding Evelich Court as very high fire hazard severity zone. In fact, Evelich is right at the epicenter of this red map. This designation was just made last week, and new information demands new action. It's simply not possible that this material piece of news has been accounted for in prior assessments or in the housing element that was previously approved. Given this new information, the city needs to pause and reassess the project without violating state housing laws. This isn't about defying state mandates. It's about ensuring that the city's decisions are based on the most current and comprehensive information that we have available. And proceeding without a comprehensive review, be it an EIR, be it fire hazard study, evacuation study, it's not just about risk, it's a choice. If the project proceeds without addressing these hazards, fire, traffic, evacuation, the city will not have performed its due diligence and would not have fulfilled its duty of care to the public's best interest. The issue of inadequate notifications that sort of jump-started this entire project at Evelich remains a significant procedural concern that over 700 residents are keenly aware of and remember. This is a live issue. I urge the council not to compound the problem at this juncture. Transparency isn't just a procedural step, it's a safeguard for all of us. And to add to this, just 1,000 feet away at Linda Vista Park, there is yet another project that's still pending review. Reviewing and approving projects like Evelich or like the one near Linda Vista Park in isolation, especially given the heightened fire risks and concerns, would not only be premature, but it also fails to provide a complete picture of the cumulative risks to the residents and to the city. Like others, I also urge the council to consider the fire insurance implications. Insurers are increasingly withdrawing from high-risk areas or raising premiums drastically. We could face unsustainable costs or become uninsurable. So in light of these factors, we respectfully urge the City Council to suspend future approvals of the Evelich Court project until an EIR is completed and all fire hazards are completely and thoroughly addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And our final speaker is Tracy Kay. Welcome, Tracy.
Hi, good evening, City Council. Thank you so much for your time this evening. I wanted to quickly comment on the recycled water feasibility study, the memo that came out on February 13th, I believe. I certainly hope that the staff and council will not further fund this expensive consultant study at, I think 200,000 more was the amount. It has been shown that the cost of the recycled water is just wildly out of budget for us. $54 million for option 1 and $9 million for option 2. And, with a time frame of hundreds of years in order to recoup the cost of the water project, where currently we're only paying about $90,000 a year for the water. And then on top of that, you have the impact to the environment that would happen from the recycled water with increased salinity and, potentially causing things like leaf burn to the surrounding trees that hasn't been fully researched. So again, for a number of reasons, cost being a very large one at anywhere from 9 to 54 million, but also for the environmental impact, I would please ask that we not further fund this consultant study. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tracy. Mayor, no additional requests to speak for this item.
Thank you. So the city manager, could we get an update on the parking situation for Westport senior housing?
Of course.
Especially.
We can do that in the info memo.
Okay, thank you. And anyone else has any referral? Then I would like to make a comment. Thank you for coming. I cannot imagine what it feels to have to wake up every day to hateful message in your neighborhood. And I cannot imagine how children have to walk by a house with such hateful message. I want to affirm that the city and the city council stand firmly against all hate speech within our community and beyond. However, our actions are constrained by the nation's First Amendment right to free speech. I encourage you to report any potential hate crimes to the law enforcement. We reiterate that the city opposes all forms of uncivil behavior and hate speech, and we are committed to fostering a community where everyone feels safe and belongs. Thank you. So next we have the consent calendar. So may I have a motion? So we have item 5 is tabled.
Mayor, I believe your microphone is off.
Sorry.
Thank you.
So item 5 is tabled, and we have item 3 and 3, 4, and 6. So we should have public comment first.
And Mayor, I currently see no requests to speak on the remaining items on the consent calendar.
Okay. May I have a motion?
Through the mayor, I move items 3, 4, and 6.
Second.
Okay. Anyone has any question on these items? No? Okay, then we can vote.
The motion carries unanimously.
Next one on the calendar is number 7, Baker Tilly Budget Format Review and Performance Measures Update.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Thank you. I see my presentation has been put up on the screen. Christina Alfaro, Director of Administrative Services. With me this evening, I have Steve Tolaire, the Director for Baker Tilly. We're going to split this presentation in a bit of a sandwich. I will take the front and the first slide and the last few slides, and Steve will have the meat of the presentation right in the middle. Give me a second. My slides are not advancing. Steve's going to give it a spin. Success. All right. On the agenda this evening, I'll go over some background and an introduction. Steve will cover the report and the findings in the report, and then I will go over next steps and recommendations. So a little bit of background and introduction. I've already introduced Steve Tolaire, but we identified a need in looking at our budget document, which was quite a robust budget document, I think over 600 pages at this point. And when we had gone out into the community, when we met with council members and staff, I mean, the feedback that we get is that the document, people don't generally use the document. It's a big document, a lot of great information, but difficult to navigate. We heard this when we spoke to residents, and they were kind of unaware we were in some sort of a budget crisis. They hadn't really looked at the book, right? We get it when we're meeting sometimes with council members and there's a request, where do I find this or that? And we're having to navigate them, be like, oh, it's here in the book, or it's here in the book. And that really spoke to that staff that used the document on a daily basis was well versed with it, but it did not appear to be intuitive to everyone else. We also heard in terms of performance measures that from the staff working on performance measures, they didn't quite understand the impact of the work they were doing, why they were necessary, aside from this is one of the requirements on the GFOA, or Government Finance Officers Association, and California Society of Municipal Finance Officers, so GFOA and CSMFO. It's one of the requirements to receive the budget award. And so we really wanted to go back to basics on performance measures, and we want them to be meaningful. And so we wanted to engage with someone from the outside to come look at our performance measures, look at our budget document, and tell us areas that we might be able to improve. And so for that, we engaged with Baker Tilly, who had worked with us on our streamlining, but improving our 10-year financial forecast. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Steve, who will take you through his presentation.
Christina, good evening. It's on. Check, check. Is it on now? Are you hearing me okay? All right, sorry about that.
It's good to see you all again, this time in person. Again, and I'm Steve Toller with Baker Tilly. It's a privilege to continue to support you and with this important project. Thank you for not calling me the middle of the Oreo cookie sandwich, you know, the sweet inside. So anyways, tonight I would, want to talk to you about what some people call one of the more important documents that you work on an annual or biannual basis, depending on the city, in your case an annual basis, and that's really the budget document. Because it really tells a story in terms of what the priorities are of the community and how you're intending to use the resources that you have been asked to oversee and to spend to really support the quality of life of the community. And so along those lines is the concept of, how are we evaluating our performance in meeting those goals of our highest priorities? And that's really what the budget document helps to prove. There's a whole bunch of other documents I know that you work on, master plans, et cetera. But the budget document is something that you work on an annual basis. And so given that priority, we were involved with helping to help you, really give you an independent analysis and observations and recommendations based on the work that we do for cities throughout California and throughout the United States as well, in terms of informing how this document might be improved in terms of conveying your highest priorities, how you're spending your money, and as well as, again, how you're evaluating performance. And so what we were asked to do and what we really focused on was that budget document, is to review it, to enhance the performance measures. But importantly is how do they align with your priorities, and then how are there opportunities to be able to use this document to be able to improve transparency and accessibility of that information so that the community not only can work alongside you and also help inform you in terms of what the priorities are to inform your decisions. And so our approach was, reviewing the document itself, all 600x pages, as well as some of the performance data that was available. I had the privilege of being able to meet with you, at least virtually, as part of this, as well as our staff and our team was able to meet with city staff to chat with them about their perspectives as well. We did do some research, and that was in the report that we provided to you in terms of other agencies and their practices as it relates to the budget document. And then finally, looked at this through the lens of your strategic goals, or at least your work program or your highest priorities, in terms of understanding how the budget relates to that, as well as the performance measures that were included within it. And so I think in order to do that, though, it was important for us to step back and say, what are the guiding principles that really identify what an ideal budget document and performance measures are? And I think it really stems across these 5 different elements here, is to what extent is the budget document and the performance measures upon which you are evaluating if the city is achieving its priorities, to what extent is that aligned with your strategic initiatives? To what extent do they really support the concept of fiscal stewardship and demonstrating the importance as well as the administration of your city's finances and the resources that have been provided to the community? How does it translate in terms of engagement with the community and gaining their insight and input to help inform you about what the priorities are for the community, as well as the concepts of transparency and what are the aspects and the factors that you considered in informing your decisions, as well as making those decisions in a transparent fashion. And then finally, the concept of accessibility, and in this regard, it means how easy is it to understand what the key priorities are that you have and how you funded them. And so that's really some of our guiding principles with this. And so we've identified in our report our analysis, and you've seen that in the report that's attached to the agenda. we had some observations as well as some recommendations, and just to try to boil those down, because we had 33 recommendations, to boil those down into the top areas. I think the things that we heard and saw and analyzed based on our independent analysis is it's rather detailed, but it's rather difficult to navigate as well. And so we understand why there were some questions about that. Is that it needs to also be a little bit better aligned in terms of a strategic initiatives and where you're going. I'm very understanding of the meeting that you had last night where you talked about some of those strategic initiatives, and I applaud you. Way to go for having that conversation and the continued conversations you're going to have about that, and that should very well inform the budget document. We also identified and saw that while we believe and understood that the pressing capital needs that you had did inform the development of the annual budget, there was no capital improvement plan that was included with that budget. And I think that for purposes of being able to share with the community and help them understand what the long-range investments are that you need to make in infrastructure to support the community's needs, that needs to be in there, as well as the concept of public engagement. There are a lot of engagement tools that the city is already using to try to inform the community about that. But we also heard and identified the potential for some improvements in terms of that engagement strategy. And so the recommendations that we had, and again, over 30 recommendations in total in this report, really boiled down to 5 areas that we see could improve the document. And without going through a detailed list of the table of contents that we have identified as that was in the report that would help with the budget document, we think basically the 5 areas are in this area of streamlining, how do you improve the readability, as well as to make the structure a little bit more accessible to all of the different people that will use it. You as the decision makers ultimately, staff as the ones that need to implement the provisions of what has been provided, and the community to help understand, the document and what your highest priorities are and how you've funded them. We also took a look at the layout of how departments are presented, and have identified some opportunities to be able to make that a little bit more standardized across the various departments, still provide the information that's needed, and I'll talk about that here as we get towards the end of this, but making sure that data is available for the community as well as yourselves to evaluate how we're doing as we go through the year. The CIP plan has to be an integrated part of the budget document. It needs to be an integrated part of the discussions and conversations you have. And so that's something that's really critical. There are opportunities to look at that engagement strategy that you have and identify ways to be able to improve that, as well as improve the transparency elements of that. And we've provided some recommendations in there about that. And I've talked about strategic planning enough, but you get the sense that it's got to be really stemmed based on your strategic priorities. When it comes to performance measures, again, how do you evaluate how the city's performing if you don't understand what its highest priorities are and the things upon which it should be evaluated? And so I think the city goals component is really important. I know that the performance measures, and we find this with a lot of agencies, and so it's Cupertino is unique in so many regards, but we have seen several instances where agencies have focused on workload rather than outcomes, focusing on counting widgets rather than understanding how we're doing, really, and so really, trying to look at opportunities to be able to take those performance measures and really flip them and make them focused on priority. Now, they need to have some data evaluating, with that, so that it gives you some quantitative, but there are also some qualitative aspects as well that we've identified in the various performance measures. There has been no standardized update process in the past, and in some regards, there's been a little bit or a lack of full engagement with staff in terms of what, the performance tracking mechanisms and really having them be part of that conversation and development of those, as well as the tracking of that on a consistent basis. And so the 4, again, recommendation areas that you see manifested in the various performance measures that we've identified here are really about, priorities and the alignment of those with your strategic initiatives, measuring outcomes, having some standardized reporting and updates that will help you and the community understand how we're doing, and really identify areas where we need to improve, as well as areas where we're hitting it out of the park, and celebrate those areas of success. And finally, the concepts of all these different performance measures will increase the concepts of accountability, and making sure that staff stays involved with all of those performance measures. Again, my applause for last night's efforts in terms of the conversations you had about your strategic vision and priorities, and we provided some of that information in the in our report to you. But it really will help in terms of not only your budget document, but also how you will be evaluating it for the future. So understand that based on the outcomes of yesterday and the continued conversations you have, the performance measures that we recommended, which were based on the priorities that we heard from you as part of our interviews, as well as what was part of the prior budget document, you're going to have to take a fresh look at those again and make sure that it's focusing on giving you the metrics that you need to evaluate that against what your highest priorities are. And so think that, there's a phasing approach in terms of being able to implement all these various recommendations. Here we sit in March, and staff is already working to start development of the budget that the city manager will be presenting to you as the proposed budget. And so we understand that there's going to be a phasing in terms of some of these recommendations, but we think that these 4 concepts are really important. Is that implement those budget document improvements perhaps over the next couple of years. Focus on those areas of transparency and community engagement that will help better inform you in terms of your priorities for resource assignment. And then, really you've done this strategic planning process now, and then make sure you revise those performance measures based on what your highest goals are. We've provided a draft implementation action plan as part of this, where we have taken each of the recommendations, identified some recommended implementation steps to start the implementation process for each of the recommendations. We also provided our thoughts in terms of what the prioritization is, and did that along the lines of what you're seeing on this slide and what you saw in the IEP, the draft IEP, which is, those priority 1 areas are things that you should do first, which is which can either be done, without, or need to be done without delay, and in some regards are just easy to accomplish. Knock those out. Should have some success in terms of knocking those out. The second tier areas will probably involve a little bit more complexity or time to complete, like perhaps some changes to any of the systems like an OpenGov or any of the internal processes that you have, and also ensuring that you're able to create the metrics and the data that you'll be able to gather with respect to those performance measures. And then priority 3, they're important to do, but they're probably less urgent than the other 2 priorities, and they may take a little bit longer. And so know that the draft implementation action plan is indeed that. It's a draft, and it only becomes the IAP when your staff and you, with your blessing, identify the target dates, you affirm and modify the steps, and then you also apply any of the resources that are required, whether that's people, dollars, or time that are needed to implement those. And so I've just highlighted for you on this slide how we've taken the various recommendations and kind of an overall summary in terms of the prioritization. But I think if I were to boil it down, it's really finalize your document for this year as you're currently doing, but ensure that you're including the CIP plan, review your fiscal policies and incorporate them into the document. But we've made some recommendations in terms of how you can do that, and I'll mention that here in a minute in terms of what we heard from the audit committee at our meeting with them in February. Start finalizing some of those performance standards. And I think the second phase, or priority 2 then, is implement those budget layout changes for 26-27, keeping an eye on the current year and what you're doing to perhaps, steps to be able to get towards that point as you're focusing on your current budget. And then do quarterly tracking of the CIP plan that would be included in the 25-26 budget. Continue to do quarterly tracking of your CIP progress and your priorities and how those are aligning with one another. And then priority 3 are more areas that are, may take a little bit more time or might be a lesser priority than some of those other ones. But I think one of the things that came up as part of our conversation with the audit committee in February is this concept of how do we ensure that the detailed information for those that are very interested in it still can be accessed, and that it adheres to what the original adopted budget was. So that's going to be really critical, as well as ensuring that not only is that accessible, but that those performance measures are aligned with the priorities. And so let me just briefly cover what the feedback was that we heard from the audit committee, and then of course you two audit committee members can reflect on that. But first is their recommendation, not only above and beyond accepting the report, was to pilot this budget format for 26-27, and then check in. And it's always, when you're doing a major overhaul of something like this, it's always good to do the check-in. How did it work? Are there ways that we can further improvement? They stressed the importance of including the CIP plan in the budget documents, providing and maintaining those details that are currently in there in the form of an appendix, which is what our recommendation was, but ensuring that it is available. And whether it's available as an appendix within the document or attached to it itself, or whether it's available online or a combination of the two is important. But to the next point, ensuring that that original adopted budget is easily accessible so that it doesn't get lost in any, changes happen. Change happens during the year. You've got some recommendations here, I think, in your next agenda item for some, tweaks that might need to be made to appropriations, et cetera. I think it's important, though, to ensure that you can always go back to what was the original adopted budget, and then what were some of the changes that were made throughout it. So don't lose what the original adopted budget was based upon. Ensuring those performance measures are aligned with priorities, and one of the things that the audit committee mentioned as an example was economic development, performance, and really looking at those. Continue to use graphics was something that was important, because a picture's worth 1,000 words and helps tell a story a little bit better than reading what, other than Christine and I perhaps, what might be very boring text in conversations about appropriations and government funds. This concept of the financial policies is, our recommendation was to summarize those policies in your budget document. Have them available somewhere clearly, but to really synthesize that down, because I think a lot of people get lost in that. I think there are opportunities for you to do that, and the audit committee stressed that point of ensuring that there's, in the budget document, that there's a summary of the purpose and effect of each of those policies, that still the full policies are completely accessible, and whether it's on an online PDF version of being able to hyperlink to those policies themselves, or having them in an appendix, or whatever way, shape, and form, ensuring that the full policies are there, but also the importance that if any changes to your policies, whether they're new ones whether they're deleted ones, which is probably less likely, or changes that are amendments that are made to those policies as part of the budget conversation, that those are summarized within the document itself to help the reader understand, here are our policies, and here was what we've changed that has helped inform the approval of this budget. And then finally, one of the points that they made is that the internal audit function that you have, that you've outsourced with a firm to help support you on that, while in some regards in the past it has been included, I think, within like the finance department budget, one of the things that they stressed is that that internal audit function really should be reporting and is rightly reporting to the city council. And so to reorganize that internal audit function in the budget to ensure that it's within the city council budget, as well as any of the performance measures that might be stemmed from that. So that concludes my presentation. I'm going to toss it back to Christina, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Steve. All right. As for next steps, staff will be reviewing the draft implementation action plan provided and seeing what we think we can knock off for next year's budget and formulate that plan. And our plan is to bring that back to council as part of the proposed budget for your review of that plan. And then once that plan is approved, start working on the implementation of that plan. Recommendations for this evening are on the slide before you, and that concludes our presentation, and we are both available for any questions you might have.
Thank you. So now we go to council questions. I think it's a good idea to take turn like council that like Vice Mayor did last time. So maybe Council Member Wong and Fruin and Mohan, and then Vice Mayor Moore. Councilmember Wong.
Excuse me,
Mayor,
yes. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, a few questions here. These budget formats are pretty standard across most municipalities. Would you agree that there's different places to choose and kind of standardize across? You've taken best practices across these. Is that what we've done here?
Yeah, there are some standardization in terms of how the flow of different funds are showed and the departments, et cetera. We used that and thought about that as we were providing our recommendations. But let's face it, each community is different, and there's a different flavor perhaps for each community in terms of what's important. And I think that the budget format itself should think about the unique situation that Cupertino finds itself in and the areas of importance.
Totally understood. That's a formatting issue versus a structural reporting issue. Yeah. When you think about the nature of how data is presented today, it's very interactive, right? And a format that is standardized for the next 2 years could change in the next 5 years. What have we thought about in terms of making that data accessible and interactive so that any individual can format it in the way that they want to?
Yeah.
Is that part of the recommendation at all in this?
Yeah, so one of the recommendations that we included in there is we recognize that the city has already invested in a tool called OpenGov that provides access to some of the detailed information so that the public can not only see what the adopted budget was, maybe in a hard copy form, right? PDF form for those that are most of them online, but also they can go into the details themselves and be able to generate their own reports and help them understand what are some of those key revenue sources. And then also OpenGov helps to track budget versus actual throughout the year.
Yeah, without using OpenGov, I mean, you basically have a data set which you can throw a Power BI or Tableau or other tool on top of it to be able to interactively create reports. Is that part of the recommendation?
So the city could if it wanted to, but OpenGov does have a lot of that robust feature set in it.
It does.
That will allow you to be able, and the user to be able to take that data and work with it as well. Strong supporter of Power BI, so I'm with you on that.
And then on performance measures that are listed there, are those performance measures typically something that a city council would suggest, or is it coming from the departments themselves in terms of the cities that you visited?
Yeah, so in our experience, the city councils will typically set the tone in terms of what their expectations are of what is considered performance, excellent performance perhaps, right? And then they will work with staff and have staff identify what are some measures that we can do to evaluate that. And that's why I always went back to that concept of the priorities and the goals.
The reason I ask is only because the performance measures, I mean, there are many good ones in there, and some of them are, they're tied back to financial model or a financial measure, or tied back to an action, but there's some vanity metrics in there which are just counts, like number of permits filed or something like that. Yeah. So in terms of streamlining that, would you recommend that we actually move away from vanity metrics to more actionable metrics? And then the second point to that is assigning where that fits within the tier. Is that good performance or bad performance?
Yeah, and that is something that really needs to be identified, because not only is it the measure and the metric itself, and getting away, I totally love that, getting away from the vanity metrics and more towards really what speaks to performance, but also establishing the standard. Okay. In some cases we had recommended some standards that should be in there, but I think that the council needs to make some decisions about that. For example, what is the expected time in terms of turning around a water heater permit? That type of
that makes a lot of sense. We're limited on time, so I'm going to save a minute for later. But my point is, for example, in some areas in performance, like in transportation, we fail to think about the car. They're one-sided to certain areas, and so it's balancing out some of those metrics that are important. I yield back.
Okay, so Councilmember Fruin.
So I kind of want to situate where we are in this whole space, like our role as council, and in particular looking at the implementation plan. There's a number of recommendations that look like they are sort of administrative policy changes, and then there are others that are clearly things that we would be directing, and then there's some other stuff that kind of sits in an uncomfortable in-between space. And I'd really like some notion of how we should be thinking about this in relation to, for example, the city work program. There's a number of things in here that I'm sure are going to take a lot of time to implement, some that will be shorter. So if you can just comment, perhaps this is a better question for Director Alfaro.
I'm not sure which one of us you wanted to respond to. I think, let me just start as you're booting up here. I think that as you look at the various recommendations, there are several that are administrative to be implemented, right? I mean, they're all going to have to be ultimately implemented by staff. But I think in terms of your policy direction, really in the form of, I think, what the response was from the audit committee, which is that we want to see this, make sure the CIP is part of it, that we want to ensure that we're maintaining the transparency and accessibility of the original adopted budget information. I think some of those stem from policy direction that you'll be providing. The best policy direction that you could probably give is, to the extent that you support what the recommendations are in this, is that in tonight's action, is that you have the city manager and her designees, start implementing the areas. But I think also the policy direction is also in terms of some of those recommendations. What do you view as the top priorities? And I think that's what staff is going to be working with you on. And is the prioritization appropriate for what your expectations are? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, if I had to give a concrete example, recommendation 31 is to develop a citywide strategic plan, right? That seems very much an us thing. And then there are others that I think sit in this sort of uncomfortable space. Recommendation 26 on special projects policy, right? Where some of this seems to be something that would be driven inside the city, and some of it is something that would be driven by us. And since we're in the middle of the city work program discussion, I just want to see where we are situated with respect to that, with all of the items that are here in the implementation plan. Is this something that we should be thinking about as specifically a city work program item, or is this something that we should just be expecting staff to be bringing forward in the ordinary course of business, kind of like we are with the housing element implementation, right? That's not something that is in our work program for this year, but we know that there are things that we've committed to as a city, and those policies will continue to move their way forward as they're developed.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the work plan that you have and the special projects and all that, I think As we had conversations with you, not you specifically, but with council and staff on this, and reading some of the reports and some of the feedback that was there, I think there needs to be a common understanding amongst the council and the staff in terms of what a special project is, defining it, and then what the reporting needs are that you have, so that we can see how things are doing. And I think part of that, some of the conversations that came up is ensuring that it's clear about where that project came from and under what authority it was provided. And so I think that those are elements that the council needs to weigh in on, and then staff then needs to help support you with that by giving what you need, right? So, yeah.
Okay.
And I would just add to that. I think from my perspective, the budget is, although this is a much more robust change to the budget, we consistently work to try to update that budget document. And I would look also forward to leveraging things that are already in place, like our audit committee, who is in charge of giving feedback on our format, working with them hand in hand. There are a lot of changes that are being recommended. We want to make sure we're not missing the mark, because a lot of work goes into doing some of these items. So I think from my perspective, we kind of take it on as part of our day-to-day as we try to implement these items, versus a council work program item. We actually probably, based on the timeline, expect it to span quite a number of years as we try to get through all of these items. So that would be my perspective on it, that it'd be part of our day-to-day that we do to make sure that the budget is a useful, easy to understand document.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Councilman Propohe.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Steve and Director Alfaro, for your presentation. I am on the audit committee, so much of a discussion or the presentation by both Director Alfaro and Baker Tilly has been sort of reviewed by the audit committee, but I wanted to just emphasize a couple of things. That a budget document is really, it's a complicated document, and I think I may have said this. There are really two different, I guess, populations that look at a budget document. There are the professionals, the accountants and the city folks who are looking for certain information. And then there's the public who doesn't really want to delve into all these details, but who do need sort of an overview of how the city is doing. Is the city doing well? Is the city not doing well? Is there a deficit? Is there not a deficit? And what is a plan? And the budget, after all, is a plan. So taking all that into consideration, I wanted to say that the audit committee, and I think the council, had shared some of the concerns about the budget book. And I am happy to say that even at the audit committee, we did come upon a resolution for most of the concerns that we had expressed. Some years ago, we had something called Budget at a Glance, and that was a sort of a separate document, user-friendly, just a little sort of like a booklet. It was just great for, I remember picking it up many years ago and sort of I worked in the county and showed it around and said, hey, this is what we should be doing. It was just a user-friendly, simple, had all the important things that we needed to know about a city without going into too many details. So and I think something of that nature is being revived in the 26-27 pilot that you will be embarking on. My other concern was the CIP. That's such an integral part of the budget, and it doesn't really show up in the budget book as we know it. And I know we'll probably have to go 1 year doing it the way we are doing it now, and then having it incorporated in the budget document. Am I right?
So at the current size the budget document is now, we would not be able to bound the books together if we did. So we do need to shrink the size of the printed book in order to, if it's printed. right? So if it's online, that should be easy for us to do, but if we're looking at a printed document, they still have to be two.
Right, I see that. And the fact that we do mid-year budget reviews gives us a good indication of the progress of the CIP project. So that's really helpful. The performance measures, that was a big part of our conversation at the audit committee meeting, and that's always a tricky thing. What are we measuring? And I know there was a question about who makes the decision about performance measures. And really, I think it's a combination of staff as well as managers, because there really has to be a nexus between the strategic priorities that the council has already decided. But at the same time, we want to make sure that staff is measuring something that they consider important. And I'm just going to use a quick example about the number of permits, for example. It's good if I was in charge of approving permits, I wouldn't want to know how many permits I approved. But I think you made a slight change, which makes actually more sense. How many permits were approved within what time? Did it take a week? Did it take a month? Did it take 6 months? So that, if I was a member of the public, would be more relevant to me. So overall, because I'm running out of time, I'm happy that you've incorporated all the changes that we certainly talked about, and look forward to seeing a pilot document in 26, 27. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Moore.
Okay. Thank you so much for the report, and I also was on the audit committee and really appreciated again a chance to speak about the budget and having a more structured review of it, because we haven't had that in the past. In the past, it would be like a subcommittee of the audit committee that would be tasked with going over the budget format. So this structured approach, I really appreciate it, and it's great to see somebody else looking at the budget intently and providing those recommendations. So one question I have is regarding the CIP. Is that going to be available to adopt at the same time as the budget this year, whether it's combined in one book or not? Are we trying to move towards that?
I think that's our goal.
Okay.
We're hoping to have both documents in tandem with each other this year.
Okay, great. And I have seen that on other city websites where they'll show both the budget book and the CIP. With regards to performance measures, would you suggest that we hold some kind of regular study session, since we're making some modifications to that, to get some feedback and see what people think? Because I have to be honest, I skim through that section and bypass it, and I'm going for the numbers. I just want to see how so there needs to be, for me, something that really makes it more important and drives that.
Yeah, I think to that point, Ms. Mayor Moore, I think that it's important for you to have conversations and set the priorities, right? In terms of what does a successful city look like? What are your expectations for performance, right? And some of that is going to take a little bit more time for you to kind of talk through, right? Because one person's, water, again, I try to use a simple example because there's the harder ones, of course, but, a water heater, permit, should it be in a day, in, a week, or in a month of the turnaround? What is the standard upon which you want to, evaluate successful performance here? And I think that will have some conversation to it, sure. But I think that from a policy level, it's helpful for you to say, here are the big issues that we're trying to achieve, here are the big goals that we have, and staff, here are the performance measures that we've seen, perhaps some of our recommendations that we think will drive to that, but then you set the tone in terms of what your expectations are for performance. And does that in a regular council meeting or is it in a study session? It might take a little bit of time to be able to go through that, so you might need to do a separate study session. Sorry to ask you for another meeting.
Okay, no worries. And if you were watching last night, you saw that we went rather quickly to get a set of goals, and there could be a lot more discussion about that and with the metrics. So I don't recall seeing these priority numbers at the audit committee for the implementation steps. And there's one area where I have a little bit of concern regarding the policy for special projects. So after we met for the audit committee, I started going through special projects, and I actually compiled them all from when they started to show up in the budget, and which was fiscal year 2014. So I've compiled them all to the present, and then I finally got into OpenGov to track them as well, the budgeted versus actual amounts, and noticed at one point the city work program had some designations as being special projects. So I think with regards to that policy, I think we need to have someone make a decision about whether it makes sense to make the work program items special projects for tracking and rebudgeting at the end of the year, and also a policy regarding rebudgeting. So, but that being said, my concern is that we've set the policy item, I think, as a 3, when I think we might want to move it up and actually start talking about it like now, because it's going to make a change to the budget. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'll take that one. I agree. I think we'll be looking to move quickly on the special project. I think in speaking with City Manager Wu and to the departments, this is something that we all kind of feel like we'd really love to get a better grasp around and understand as we move forward. So that would be one. That's where we as a team get to look at the list and decide we might want to move this up further, right, for specific reasons that are happening, or maybe we think it's easier than what Steve's team think it is to implement, and we won't want to pull that one. So that for me, I can tell you would move up into priority. You know, it's ideally I'd love to get you a draft by proposed budget, but there are a lot of things happening. So I think, but likely no later than Q1 to try to get some sort of draft policy for council's consideration.
Through the mayor, would Vice Mayor Moore want my 53 seconds?
To get my thoughts together. Yes, thank you. So with regards to also the CIP budget and the being able to track those items, I would like there to be a way that looks similar to the special projects tracking that we're seeing now. I'm not sure that that's terribly helpful information, but going back with the special projects, the policy would need to also include when new ones can be added, when old ones get removed, because some monies are being locked into how it looks to a department at a like a decade ago, and that they're still being able to hang on to that, and that seems like a policy we would want to alter. And oh gosh, I had one more in there, but it's escaping me at the moment. So please take the rest of your time.
Okay, so I just heard I just checked the budget at a glance at the city website. So we don't have one for fiscal year 25, but we have all the previous years. Is this something we're not doing, or?
I'll take that question, Sir the Mayor. So that was a decision because, number one, we were late in getting the budget at a glance document last year, and it was just a lot of information, as you can imagine, that we were also going through a budget crisis last year. So it just wasn't the right time to get that document ready.
So will we have that? Will we have that later, or we are deciding to drop that?
So I think one of the recommendations from Baker Tilly is to have that back for the next fiscal year budget. So we're going to be working on a newer version of the budget at a glance for the proposed budget for next year.
Okay, but then we will not go back and have a budget in a glance for 24-25 budget.
As we are already in Q3, it probably doesn't do a whole lot of values by spending staff resource to come up with the budget glance now, as opposed to focus on the proposed budget for next year?
Because this kind of document is really helpful. And I also look at historical budget at a glance. You compare them, and when there is one missing year, just, I don't know. Yeah. Okay, I'll move forward. So thank you for answering my questions in the supplemental. I think one concern is the OpenGov is very good at not concerned. So OpenGov is very good at viewing historical data, and the staff response is it's possible to add historical information in the forecast section. So is that one of the recommendations or not?
I love historical data because it helps tell a story and provide context. And so I think that there are opportunities to not only leverage OpenGov and its capabilities to be able to show that historical data so that you can see what the trends are, but then also the conversation is, and what we would recommend is that perhaps in the financial forecast section of the budget is that you expand some of the historical data to help tell that story. Because as we talked about when I was here back in June or May, it was to talk about the financial forecast, to see where you're heading, it's important to see where you've come from.
Yeah, exactly.
With that storytelling.
A lot of budget section, we only see where we are going. We don't see where we are coming from. So it's important to include that. It will be, so is that included in the recommendation? That's included, right?
And it wasn't a specific recommendation, but I think in conversation with staff and in this light of this conversation, I think it's important to have that historical data in the financial forecast section of the budget.
And
to
then,
help tell the story.
And then also I think what the recommendation is to add more charts. I think OpenGov is really great. There are a lot of charts. If we can include those in the budget document, that would help to give higher level information. But the concern with OpenGov is it's unclear whether the data is based on a static, it probably comes from a static table, but it's interactive view of that table. So like Councilmember Wang said, we would like to have interactive view of adopted budget, but the user just want to have the certainty that is the adopted budget with the fixed numbers. It's not I'm checking the link 2 years later, it's going to have a different number. So I think your answer kind of addressed that, so I just want to confirm that. It's possible to be interactive based on static data.
Correct. So when there are point in time, there are stopping points, and I know some of the questions come out sometimes like, hey, you're talking about mid-year and it's March. Why aren't you talking about something that happened in February? And so when we do budget reporting, we have stopping points where we say, okay, December 31st, we need to close everything out. Those numbers stop moving, and we can report on those numbers. So similarly, in the budget document, we do have those numbers. So we know we've closed the books and we have actuals. That means our annual financial report has been issued. Right, those are certain stopping points. The adopted budget is also a fixed point.
I have only 30 seconds. So your answer says that the budget document will still be in PDF. When it's in PDF, how does that support interactive accessing of the data? Or could some data could be in Excel spreadsheet, and then that can support interactive?
We would have both. So in OpenGov, you have the ability to create an interactive document, and then from that document, create a PDF.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, now we go to the public comment. Do you have more questions?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So within...
Okay, so we have a lot of items today, so so we just have 2 minute question for each person?
Sure, thank you.
Okay.
Within the February report, there were several redlined items which were recommended to just have an overview between pages 23 and 27, actually further, 29. And these would include, essentially, it's all of the tabs towards the end of the book, in the budget book right now, that it would all go into an overview and that you would be linked to OpenGov at some point. However, having gone through OpenGov, I don't find the same data. So I believe the request was that we would have those still available the same way in an appendix for now, so that we don't lose that. And the reason why I'm concerned about losing that information is that I'm able to look at the numbers and make it kind of an educated guess for whether it needs to have some more review, and the library hours was one of those. And if we lose that and it's put in a link, I'm losing information that I can go research, because it's broken out under full-time employees, cost allocation, all of that, and I can see those numbers and then ask questions based on those details. So for this year and moving forward, is that going to be retained? And is it a council action required to no longer provide that information and just have it be an OpenGov link?
I think we're hoping to resolve those issues as part of our work with the audit committee on budget format, and then being able to bring those back to council to make sure they're comfortable with those decisions as we move forward. I know we've heard loud and clear that it is important to keep the detail that has existed. We don't want that to go away. So from our standpoint, we'd be looking at keeping that detail, but not in the main book, right? So it could be an appendix, it could be an OpenGov, it could be both of those, depending on how easy it is to pull the data out.
Thank you. Since we don't have someone actually auditing these budget numbers at this time. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any more questions?
Yeah, I have a quick one. I think in the recommendations, I thought it was kind of interesting that we are in the midst of selecting a new ERP system, and typically budgets are tied back to the financial system. I didn't see a recommendation to do anything like that. Is that something you would suggest that we do to be able to streamline that, because your financial transactional system's sitting there?
Oh, they need to be like this for sure. We just didn't make a recommendation on it because we weren't sure where you were going to be with respect to your ERP selection.
Yeah, and I will point out that OpenGov has a direct API connection into our system.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, then we go to the public comment. Thank you.
Mayor, I currently see one person requesting to speak virtually. So I will go to that person, San R. Welcome, San.
Good evening, Mayor Chow and council members. My feedback on this item is to really split this out into two agenda items discussed on separate council meetings. The focus around budget needs to be kept separate from the performance measures. I think the performance measures is a very, very important item because it directly comes back to the lack of satisfaction that residents have around a number of areas, particularly around our transportation, our CIP, our rate of progress on CWP, our quality of life, and public safety. On a number of these fronts, there are fundamental disconnects between the residents' perception of how the city is doing versus what the city might view of how it is faring. And so it's highly important to bring performance measures back as a separate agenda item. Secondly, I'm very disappointed there was no community engagement as a part of the study. Even though the framework talks about community engagement, Baker Tilly did not speak with residents, and there were, as Ms. Alfaro will say, there were a number of residents that were involved throughout the budget process last year. And so it is important that the resident input be considered as a part of these studies, because otherwise you're not getting the perspective of your end customers, the taxpayers who really want to see their money spent judiciously. And finally, I will also add that as you look at this process, I'm highly concerned that we're putting in a lot of additional scope into the budget process that will dilute the actual analysis of the numbers in the budget itself. And I think we have to get comfortable with the fact that there are people that enjoy the financial data and will just gravitate to the financial data, and it is a very important part of the process that we need to focus on that, versus people who will never be comfortable no matter how many times you explain it. So It is no fault of this budget process if you are having to explain the budget document to people. That will always be the case no matter how many iterations of this you produce. So I asked you to please not conflate this document by adding strategic planning and CWP and performance measures all into the same process. Please, let's keep them separate. Strategic plans need to have their own time and place, and performance measures need to be completely decoupled, and the budget process needs to really focus on financially how is the city faring. And on that note, I do agree we need to integrate CIP. CIP is a major source of dissatisfaction with residents. There is an uncontrolled amount of spend on things that residents did not ask about. And there are small advocacy groups that have back channel access to staff through things like safe routes to school, where conversations happen and projects get discussed that do not come back to council, and projects that have major impact.
Thank you, San. That is your time. Mayor, I see no additional members of the public requesting to speak on this item.
Okay, so we bring it back to the council. Anyone would like to make additional comments, or we would have a motion to help with discussion?
What's the motion?
So the recommended action is to approve recommendations outlined in the budget format review and performance measures updates report as prepared by Baker Tilly.
Is that a motion, Mayor?
I'll make the motion to start the discussion to approve the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Okay. Then so let's do a round of comments, then start with Councilmember Fruin and Councilmember Wang and Councilmember Mohan and the Vice Mayor. And if you would like more time, you can skip the term, and then we'll come back to you.
So I'm broadly satisfied with the staff recommendation, but I will say that I would be very interested in hearing the views of Vice Mayor Moore and Councilmember Mohan, since they both sit on the audit committee, and many of the recommendations come to us from there.
Thank you. Councilmember Wang.
I'll yield my time to other folks. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Mohan.
I don't have any comments other than to say that I was on the audit committee along with Vice Mayor Moore, and our concerns have been addressed by the Baker Tilly report.
Okay. Vice Mayor.
I'm up. Okay. So again, I really appreciate the report, and so glad everybody's digging into all of these details. So I'm just going to go through the draft implementation action plan and make some comments on the first page. That's PDF 100. I agree with all of the items that you have there, and then moving on to item 12, removing the full financial policies. I would personally like to make sure that we have those in an appendix, have the referent whenever they've been revised, make sure the date is there, so that we're not approving the entire budget with a revised financial policy embedded in it, which has happened in the past. It's just too much work all at once when we're doing the whole budget to have a change to a policy happen right there. So we need to be careful of that. Item 15, review the architecture and links in OpenGov to ensure accuracy. I would want to, because I've run into some issues with OpenGov I've been running a lot of documents lately, and some of the numbers I'm taking issue with. So I want to make sure that before we move to OpenGov linking, that all of the issues are understood that I'm having, and that other people might be having with the data that they're getting, and to be able to understand what the answer is, whether I've clicked all funds or general fund and then run an assessment on the actual versus the budgeted amount, and then seeing in some areas a big surplus. I don't understand why I'm seeing some of these numbers, so I need to be educated on that. So, and if I'm having that issue, there's probably other people that are going to have that issue. 18. Eliminate the program budget information in the departmental sections. I think that's referring to pages 23 to 29. I'd like to have that held off for a while, just out of my own apprehension. I love the CIP item and all of the work that you've gone into thinking about how it can be implemented. I would personally have it a priority one, but I understand the time constraints to try to get that happening. And then the quarterly tracking of the CIP priorities, I wish to see it as a 2 instead of a 3. The detailed appendix for fund transfers, I think that's awesome. Really appreciate it. And then item 26, the special projects policy, you have as a 3, and I already said I'd wish that would be a 1. And all the rest are the priority ones, which I agree with as you get to the end. So I really like this handy guide that you put together here. And as I already had mentioned, the work program items as a special project needs to have a decision made for tracking. And with that, if I would want to have some assurance, I keep bringing this item back up. I want to have some assurance that we're going to still see the departmental budget pages this year, and that that information is always somewhere that we can get to easily moving forward. Thank you.
Okay. So, yeah, I think the recommendations looks good, but I didn't find is there a recommendation for hyperlinks for the PDF files?
I think we mentioned it in the narrative of that, but we didn't make a recommendation that you should output as a PDF file. I think the concept is that you will have the adopted budget, ultimately the proposed budget, and then the adopted budget. You will have that available online as a format. And I think that by you just stressing that as part of this motion that you have on the table right now, I think that staff will ensure that you do that.
So the adopted budget will still be one PDF file, and then a lot of details will be in the appendix, but that still will be a part of that one PDF file.
Correct.
And there should be hyperlinks, I'm guessing, from the table of content, and will be interlinked to the different section and linked to the appendix.
Similar format to where we have now, just incorporating it with kind of the OpenGov architecture.
Okay, and then I just want to be sure, I think number 16 is about the forecast, and I would like the forecast to not only include the forecast but also historical data.
I've added that for my budget team's to-do list, to be looking at adding at least 5 years worth of prior year actuals. I think the only issue we run into in adding more than that years is there's so much space on a page and so many years we can fit before you can't read the data. But we're creative, we'll figure out a way, but we'll be looking to add at least 5 years of historical data in the forecast this year.
Oh, I hope it's 10 years. Yeah, it's 10 years historical and 10 years forecast, right?
Yes, we 10-year look forward, 5-year look back. So 15 years worth of data, kind of.
I hope look back is 10 years. I think 5 years is not as sufficient.
We'll work on the formatting. I think the issue is getting 20 years of data on a singular page, not crossing pages, is going to prove just difficult for formatting in terms of size.
Of course, you can put on separate chart. Historical and forecast could be a separate chart.
We'll look at ways to do that. I hear exactly what you're saying. We can add 5, we can add 10. It's just more of a formatting issue that we'd be looking at and keeping it legible.
And a picture's worth 1,000 words.
Yeah.
So graphs might be able to tell that story.
Okay. So what I have jotted down is staff recommendation hold off on number 18, eliminate the program budget information. And then number 16, I just want to be sure we include historical data. Then any other
Through the mayor, for a point of clarification, Madam Clerk, do you have a way of capturing the motion and maybe show it on the screen?
Yes, Madam City Manager.
do you need me to show it?
So are the comments from the mayor and vice mayor for inclusion in the motion?
I haven't included it as amendment. Just want to be sure I'm capturing.
And is
anything else we should capture?
And Mayor, does the Vice Mayor wish to incorporate comments in the motion?
So if this is okay, I'll make that a friendly amendment and see if the seconder agree. Is Council Vice Mayor Moore, do you have any more?
Okay. So thank you. My preference was that for item 12, remove full financial policies from the budget document and that have it as a summary, that instead we would retain the policies in an appendix.
Oh, come again, item 12.
So in the, it says to remove the full financial policies, but my preference is that we would retain the full financial policies in an appendix so that the budget document itself would be abbreviated on that item, but we still have the policies available and any revisions noted.
I think I did capture all of them.
Retain.
If you'd like me to share my screen. Or,
okay, sure, if you capture it.
So, beginning with here, we have through the draft implementation action plan, item 12, removing the full financial policies. Item 15, review the architecture and links in OpenGov to ensure accuracy. Item 18, eliminate the program budget information in the departmental sections. And you referenced pages 23 to 29 to have that held off for a while. You would like CIP item changed to a priority 1. The quarterly tracking of the CIP priorities, you would like to set it as a 2 instead of a 3. And for item 26, the special projects policy, you would like that to be a 1 instead of a 3.
Thank you. With regards to moving up the CIP item, staff needs to determine if you're able to do that. I don't want to make an unreasonable request, if possible. So in moving back up to item 12, removing the full financial policies to retain them in an appendix with the budget and any revision date.
I was going to say, I just see our Director of Public Works, Chad Mosley, and he'd be the one to better ask if it's feasible to move the CIP up in terms of kind of the completion and dates. Sorry, Chad, to catch you off guard. I think we're looking at, if I'm looking at the notes, CIP item, moving it to a priority one. So reference to that is having that book, the CIP book, printed along with the budget book. Am I correct? So I'm just trying to give you some
that's fine.
background.
And I guess, to understand it fully, you want to have the CIP book printed with the budget book, correct? Yeah, I'm not sure. Our goal is to try and get there. Just due to our staffing resources with CIP, I'm not sure that that's going to be possible. We will provide documentation on what each of the projects are, but I'm not sure we'll have the full book put in there. I guess I'm hoping that answers your question. This is the plan, and we are going to try and align that for next year if possible, but I don't know that we'll have it for this year.
May I ask, when was the CIP published for approval last year?
The CIP, so the CIP projects were approved as part of the final budget hearing and adoption. But if I don't know if we've put a CIP book together for fiscal year 24-25 yet.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we have that yet. I mean, all of the projects were within the budget, if that's what you're saying, but and I guess included with that, but not necessarily published with the budget.
So what we're saying is the pages. So there's pages that get added as an attachment when CIP comes to City Council, and they're the project pages. That's what builds the bulk of the CIP document. That shows every project, how it's funded, kind of the plans for that project. Those generous, I think what Director Mosley is referring to is those pages with that detail would still come to council and be included as an attachment to the budget, but that a full CIP book, as we had published it in 23-24 prior to that, may not be available for publishing when we publish the budget generally in by July.
And just for clarity, I mean, many of the pages that are included with the budget make up the vast majority of that CIP book.
Okay, thank you. So items like develop a minimum 5-year capital improvement plan and incorporate the CIP plan into the budget document, that would be something that would not be available this year to adopt with the budget?
No, we would have that information available with the budget. I'm just not sure that it would be included with the budget book yet. We would bring that information to City Council in April. It's with our plan, and then that would be kind of confirmed by Council, and I guess we potentially could include that into the budget book when that comes.
Okay, thank you. So I guess since is the CIP under the purview of the audit committee, since it's being added more concretely to the budget? And the reason I ask is whether or not Councilmember Mohan and myself would have an opportunity to do some further like reporting back to the council on the status of having these changes to the CIP made. Would that be going to the audit committee and then back, or should the council consider making us a subcommittee to go over the progress with the CIP as we move forward to following these recommendations?
I think if make sure Steve agrees with my interpretation here. So I view the budget book and the CIP as not one document, but companion documents. And I say that because they're actually via GFOA, and GFOA for sure, CFMSO, I'm not sure, specific awards that are given for that book specifically with specific criteria for it. And they've historically been companion documents, printing at the same time, 2 separate documents, but companions to one another. I see them, I know Steve will say it's like, yes, they're together. So we've had, they say this because Steve and I had a round and round conversation about this, that he's hoping thank you, Steve, you're back there. That's my take, is that they're not one whole document. They should be together, but kind of still maintain their independence.
They should be talking to one another, and they should be hand in hand issued at the same time. That's really my recommendation to you. I get that there's going to be some timing in terms of being able to get that done, but ultimately, when you are making decisions about your appropriations for this next year, you should be doing that under the context of the long-range capital investment needs that you have, so that you understand what you're planning on investing in the next 5 years at least, and even beyond that. And then in the context then of that, and whatever other unfunded or underfunded needs you might have, then you can make an educated decision about what you need to invest in for the next year. So what I'm saying is that it's important to have this, we believe that it's important to have the CIP plan as part of the budget document, and whether it's as a separate, chapter 2 or volume 2, that's fine. But ultimately, the best practice is to have the CIP plan, the 5-year analysis, being part of the budget document that ultimately is approved.
Thank you. Through the mayor, you're kind of pointing to another question I have, which is which we haven't addressed regarding our budget, and that's how much money should we retain in our investments, especially in light of like the CDTFA audit, and is that something that will be addressed in this year's budget? How much is reasonable for a city to retain in savings versus moving over to the CIP budget for some capital improvements?
I think the concept of reserve policy is another discussion that you need to have at another time, but I think that the point is made that you need to have some renewed conversations in light of everything that's happened in this last year or two for you, in terms of what the appropriate level of reserves are that you want to have. And again, the CIP plan can help inform that in terms of what your needs are, and then how much do you really need to have in terms of an emergency reserve.
So we have the emergency reserves, but the real question that then tends to go to, when do you have too much, in savings, and the city is kind of needing to actually spend? Is that we need a policy on the upper end that says, you're retaining so much. So is that something that could be added to our policies this go around?
We do currently have a reserve and one-time use policy that currently the way the policy is written is that any excess, once all the other reserves have been fully funded, go to CIP. That's the way the current policy is written. We've held off on doing any of those. So we came in November, we did kind of make that recommendation to say, you might want to consider moving these over per our policy. I think council will need a little more time to kind of consider what we might do with those funds. So understood, that's the way the current policy is written if council wants to see us go in a different direction. So when we built this reserve policy, we looked to GFOA and CSMFO and best practices, ensuring that we had what we considered would be a sufficient enough amount of funds in our emergency reserve based on what's happening in the city. As Steve mentioned, every city is a little bit different depending on your revenue mix and what you might have.
I think we need to move along. So I think another major concern we get from community is whether the OpenGov references will be dynamic. But as I understand from your answer earlier, this OpenGov references, you will generate a PDF from the OpenGov. So the PDF will have any of the references, any chart that's referenced, right?
Yeah, so within OpenGov, there will be certain static dates. So what we have so actuals are what move in any given year, but then they should say static once the year is adopted. So if you're looking at the current fiscal year and you looked at it in January, the numbers will be different in February. However, if you looked up the adopted budget in OpenGov in January, the adopted budget is the exact same. It should be the exact same number when you look at it in February. So some dates will change, some won't, but we'll still have a static document.
But the document will include a PDF
correct.
From the OpenGov at the time.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So that's all. I do think that performance measures, I didn't really have time to go through those. Some of them I don't feel make sense. So I think there was mention of maybe we have a start. This should be a separate item. We can consider that. So maybe the staff recommendation that we approve is on the the budget format. So do we remove the performance measure for now?
Through the mayor, I would retain what they have at this point and schedule a study session on them in 6 months' time, whatever perhaps the city manager has a suggestion, so we can have a discussion about them.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. So through the mayor, the performance measure is part of the budget. So if we don't get an approval from the council tonight, we'll use the old format. So performance measure is kind of what I was talking to council last night. This is how we, the city team, measures how your goals are implemented. So there are many, many ways to measure city team's performance, and this is just one suggestion that has been proposed by Baker Tilly. I am totally big on data, but sometimes data are not the best way to describe a person's performance. So I think with working with Baker Tilly's team, we're trying to come back with a more meaningful performance measures. So if I have the indulgence from council to let us try at least a recommendation, and to Vice Mayor's point, we can always come back with a status report and then perhaps get a satisfaction survey from the council to see how you're liking it. And I would really like to give a shot. Christina and I have been talking about wanting to build some of the recommendation into the proposed budget. As you can understand, we're in Q3. They're in a dire needs trying to get the proposed budget buttoned up. And then I'm right here saying, oh, there's Steve's recommendation, try to build it in. So you can see the conflict already going on, and time is of the essence. So if we can get your blessing on the budget format tonight with the performance measure recommendations, all of that, and we'll come back maybe in Q1, maybe in next year's mid-year budget, and to have this discussion again.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Some of the concern I had with performance measures is some of them feels like we are trying to make that number, but when that number is the goal, the quality of the might be down. But let's try it out. So, City Clerk, do you have the potential friendly amendment that we could consider? Could you share that, though? Councilmember Mohan.
No, just a quick comment, Mayor, about the performance measures. While we don't have the exact performance measures at this point, I think the general trend that, or the general strategy that we talked about at the audit committee was to make sure that we measure the right things, that we're not just measuring widgets, that we're not just measuring items, but measuring outcomes. So I think that's a good thing to have and to include. And the other comment I wanted to make was for us, for the budget document to get these big awards, there's certain elements that need to be included. And I think it's important we stick to what GFOA requires us to have. Not that awards are that important, but they are. So I would suggest that we stick to whatever GFOA needs to make sure that we are recognized for the budget book that we produce.
Mayor, I think I would like to move up the timeline.
Yeah.
This would be ready for Q1 fiscal year, as opposed to coming back to revisit it much later than that.
For performance measure?
Yes.
So about 6 months from now.
Q1.
To revisit Q1.
Beginning of Q1.
Okay, so we will revisit performance measure in Q1. Okay.
Mayor, the friendly amendment was made by Vice Mayor Moore.
So Vice Mayor Fruin, are you clear on the friendly amendment? Do you approve?
So I think I'm clear on what the friendly amendment is. My one piece of clarity that I would like from staff is sort of the actionability of the changes in terms of their priority level. When we make too many things the highest level priority, then nothing's really a high level priority any longer, and prioritization doesn't mean anything. Is this a small enough change that you feel like you can accommodate it?
I would say that's going to be entirely dependent on how we move forward with an ERP system. That will be a big task not only for our administrative services departments, but all of the other departments as well. What I would like to consider is we'll look at the implementation plan, and we've committed to come back and propose with the timeline that we think is workable, and have that discussion with the council at that time.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from you on this is all of this is contingent on the ERP anyway.
Correct.
Okay, all right. In that case, then I will accept.
Okay, so let's vote then.
So, Mayor, to be clear, the friendly amendment was for the council to conduct a study session to review the performance measures updates in Q1?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Through the mayor, it's a quick question. So we can't do this in our current ERP system? Is that what you're saying?
Performance measures or?
Performance measures.
No, they currently don't have that capability. And more I was speaking to implementing, potentially being in the process of implementing an ERP on top of doing substantial budget changes and
that's complicated, I agree. I mean, trying to do both at the same time.
Yeah.
Oh, but I thought ERP implementation would take 2 years.
To fully implement it, but the process will likely be within about 6 months process, looking at potentially bringing a contract to council and kicking off that process. But it's so the whole process takes 2 years, and it's pretty involved. And so we're just trying to temper that with what we already know is likely on the implementation plan that Baker Tilly has given us. And then we'll try to kind of balance that. And I also want to point out that it's not just me up here talking. The performance measures impact the departments, their staff, their directors. I've not had that conversation with them to understand. That's why we want to take the draft IAP back, discuss it as an executive team to understand what's feasible in the city. I don't want to be up here committing to something that I have not talked to my colleagues about yet.
Vice Mayor?
May we hear the whole motion one more time or see it?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So Chow moved and Fern seconded to approve. Yes?
Thank you.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Mayor, would you like to vote?
Yeah, let's vote.
Okay. The motion as amended carries unanimously.
Okay, great. Next, we have the mid-year financial report.
Point of privilege, Mayor. We've been going on for about 2.25 hours. I think we might all benefit from a break.
So yeah, let's take a 5-minute break.